Hi, welcome to the Sedona Soul Sisters show. I'm Ivory and this is Roz. Today's topic is spiritual well-being. Before we get started, we want to say hello to our listeners in Adelaide, South Australia. Boy, you are eager followers of the show, and thank you so much for being with us. I think this is a great topic right now because there's a lot of people who are in the opposite of spiritual wellness, which would be spiritual distress. And so we want to help you understand what it is to have well-being in your spiritual life and how to recognize when you are in distress and how to get to a place of well-being. I was like trying to think the other day, like, how do we want to open this show? How do we want to describe spiritual well-being? And I finally just looked it up online, like, why wouldn't I? Google exists. So it involves a person possessing a set of guiding beliefs, principles, or values that help give direction to their life. But it also encompasses a high level of faith, hope, and commitment to your own individual beliefs that provide a sense of meaning and purpose to you. It is willingness to seek meaning and purpose in human existence as a whole, to question everything, and to appreciate the things which cannot be readily explained or understood. That sounds like our show. Things which cannot be readily explained or understood.
True.
A spiritually well person seeks harmony between what lies within as well as the forces outside of themselves. And I think when you're not in a state of spiritual well-being. One of the things that came to my mind first, Roz, was the people who feel like they've lost their connection to God.
And I hear that a lot from people. Like they just feel that there's a sense of detachment from the way they used to feel in their emotions regarding, even, I've had a lot of clients tell me, I can't pray anymore. I can't get in the right state of mind to do that. I can't do the affirmations. And it's fundamentally like an underlying sense that they have that there's been a cord that's broken in their attachment. Or I've had a couple people say, I feel like there's no one listening anymore.
I was going to say the same thing.
There's no one there anymore.
But that's a reflection of what's going on inside of them. They haven't really lost their connection, but don't you think that's partly being shut down? And when you get overwhelmed with emotions, whether you're afraid, you're anxious, you're fearful, angry, it shuts down your ability to feel other emotions and other ties. People will often say they don't feel connected to their loved ones like they used to when they're going through a period of stress. This is a stressful time in human existence right now. Not that there's ever been a time when there was no stress in human existence, but I think this is more stressful than usual.
And I don't think people stop and really think about how they are, if they are on social media, which there's very few people who aren't. There are some, but mostly people are being bombarded by social media, by the regular, airwave media that's out there, public airways. It's just, they're constantly bombarded with negative news. It's like news, quote unquote, has become all about negativity and everything that's going on. And I really noticed it in the last couple of months. I've had people just come out and say, there's no reason to try and push to be happy or to be successful or to be, it's like they've lost their hope.
So is it any wonder they don't feel well?
Yeah, that's
in many
really,
levels.
The stairway to depression, really, is that sense of hopelessness.
I want to talk about that real quick, like that whole thing of being bombarded with all the bad news and twisted news. And everything out there. And I found this thing that was offered to me. Would you like to receive a daily digest of good news from around the world? Why, yes, I would. So I signed up for that. I make myself read that every morning because I don't want to focus on all the negativity. I can't afford, we and other people like us who are spiritual teachers, mentors, cannot afford to sink into a place of hopelessness. You can't lift others up. You can't even lift yourself up if you do that.
Well, yeah. And the truth of the matter is that that is a total tool of darkness to get people in the mindset, because it alters our energetic field, our whole perception of life, of living, of finding the joy in, small things that go on every day. And I think the other thing that happens is when you can't see any reason to feel gratitude, it's so dark. It just creates such a dark envelope that you're in. And, I'm always working on my light bubble that's around me. So that's a big focus that I think we have to admit to ourselves and realize it's my job. It's one of my purposeful decisions to stay in a bubble of light and block all that from getting into our soul. Because that's a tool for the dark to just mess with you.
Absolutely. I'm glad there's been more and more discussions lately. I've been guest appearing on some other podcasts, and the listeners actually want to hear about like ways to fight darkness and ways to prevent evil from attacking and all these different things. And I'm so glad that's coming up because it happens so often. There's some kind of core elements of spirituality, spiritual well-being, and that would be connection, both with God and with other people, peace within yourself, and purpose. And I was really thinking about that purpose element. If you're a light worker, you have an underlying purpose to share your light everywhere you go with every person you interact with your entire life. We all do. That's at least a secondary mission. And for some light workers, it's their primary mission. Like Roz and I have our missions. My mission is really core around angels, angelic work, and other spirituality work and mentoring. And Roz has her specialties in fighting the dark and helping people learn how to do that, and her work with psychic and mediumship. But we're both very conscious that we can't do our underlying mission. We can't lift other people up if we're not lifting ourselves up. And even if you're not considering yourself a light worker, you're interested in spirituality because you're listening, watching the show right now. So I think it's sort of like an obligation you have to yourself. It's part of self-care to do whatever it takes to lift yourself up and keep yourself up, not to sink into the negativity. Because if you take a moment to look around, there's so much beauty and so much goodness in the world, in the people of this world. It has not gone to hell. It has not. There's been times worse than this in history, and we made it through and got to this point. We're going to get through this too. But if you only want to see the bad things, you're only going to see the bad things. If you want to see the good things, you start to see the good things. Roz, you brought up something about gratitude. I want to think back to a person I knew who was living in their car out of necessity, not choice. And they said to me, they came to see me and they said, I thank God every day to have my car to sleep in where I can keep my things, lock them up. I have a place for my dog and I can sleep and I can park it in a camping area where there's other people around and I feel safe and secure. I don't have to sleep out on the streets. And also, they said living in their car had actually freed up finances for them to be able to afford food and medicine easier. And so, I wanted to cry. I wanted to cry as I was listening, just because I thought that was so beautiful to be in a position like that and so sure of what you're grateful for.
Very true. I feel like, we have to, it's our job. I always say my job from God,
Yes.
to look for the positives, to look for all the aspects of our life, and to really realize, focusing on the things that aren't right and you're not happy about, that's that, psychic attack methodology there, where you get into feeling that constant sadness. And I do have, I have some clients that, over the years, I mean, because a lot of the clients that I've had are pretty lengthy, and, where they occasionally can slip into that. And it's fortunate, I think, in a way that most of the people that I talk to, they have realized they have to surround themselves with other people that are upbeat, positive, that see the pluses, not the minuses. So that's another factor is, if you're constantly surrounding yourself with people who don't see the positives, that's rough,
Yeah.
because it's
That would be a
just,
scary echo chamber to find yourself in.
yeah, very true. I think a lot of what's going on now is, of course, because we have news instantly now. Like, we just had 2 gigantic major earthquakes in another country. And that's something that really, always sits in the back of a lot of people's minds, is the potential for some disastrous earth situation to occur. You have to acknowledge, of course, that that's there, but you have to also seek out the true and honest news, where you're not going to get bombarded with all the negatives, and you are going to hear, like, I always like to get the news from Doctors Without Borders, because these are people who are, they're always there. I mean, it's usually hardly any time, and they're in there working with the people, helping with everything they can help with. Outside of medical, providing medical assistance. So I think it's kind of our job too, to make sure that we're conscious about what we are seeking. Because if you just turn on the regular news, yeah, it's not going to be pretty.
They can take a nothing and make it seem like half the end of the world. So
Yeah.
You were talking like keeping people around you who are positive, who don't just dwell on the negative, but it's such a big aspect of being spiritually, of having spiritual well-being, your connection in general, like your connection to yourself, how you feel about yourself. Do you love yourself? Do you think you're a good person? Do you see the value in you? Your connection to other people. You can't just be alone all the time. Our work, Roz and I talk about this, like our work, it seems like as years go by, we become more and more isolated, but I work to stay connected with people, to get out and to do social things, because I know it's not good for me to be alone all the time. Connection to nature. How many people, I know I have a place I go locally, a state park, where I love to go walk many days a week. And it just lifts my mood immediately. And I'm just so happy to be out looking at water, watching all the birds and saying hello to people and getting some exercise and fresh air. And, you need to find your places where you enjoy being outdoors and spend more time there. And then your connection to the transcendent, whether it's angels, God, whatever you believe in, whatever your faith is, you need all those connections to have the actual spiritual well-being. I was looking up and thinking about, some of these are mine and some I looked up online. What would spiritual well-being look like? Well, one is volunteering. And I was thinking about, as you were talking, Roz, about not being able to find something you're grateful for. I think working like in a homeless shelter or any kind of volunteering with people who have less than you do, is a quick wake up call to how blessed you are. Another one is being positive and optimistic and contributing to society. You know, what are you doing to make society better? Connecting with other people, feeling a sense of belonging, even if it's to a small core tribe of people you really relate to, feeling you belong, and then practicing self-care, you know, taking care of yourself. How many times we've talked about on this show how important it is when you are in the spiritual healing metaphysical field, or even you're in a medical field. If all you do is take care of other people and you keep putting yourself on the back burner, pretty soon you fall apart in some way for a while and you can't help anybody. Both of us, Roz and I, have done that to ourselves, where we saw so many people and did so, you know, helped so many people in session, and then we sort of collapse. So, you know, I'm working really hard to avoid reaching that point again. Roz just shakes her head.
You have to.
You
really do.
You do. I mean, it just takes your energy to do your work. And no matter what you do, honestly, this is for anybody. I mean, whatever work you do takes your energy. So at least carve some time out for what you need, you know, to exercise, to get fresh air, to see people you like, love, do things you enjoy. So if you want to know how to obtain optimal spiritual wellness, one is to explore your spiritual core. You know, what do you believe? What's important to you spiritually, you know, and maybe that's part, usually when people start exploring that, at least in the beginning, they'll start realizing there's things that they believed that they no longer believe, that they are starting to shift into a new belief system. And then spend time alone, meditate regularly. You cannot progress personally or spiritually if you don't give yourself time to look at yourself, to do introspection about who you are, where you want to go. Be inquisitive and curious. You want to know more things instead of just knowing what you already know. Be fully present in everything you do. So here we go, Eckhart Tolle moment, live in the now, right? Listen with your heart and live by your principles. So live the way that you believe is the real right and way true, the golden rule. I mean, come on, do unto others as you would have done unto you. Allow yourself and those around you the freedom to be who they are. You're never going to change another person. They might choose to change because of some example you set or something they see, but people are only going to change if they want to. See opportunities for growth in the challenges life brings you. Wow. Now that's a big one. But we talk about that. We've talked about it on multiple shows, haven't we, Roz? About if you can get to a place where you can look back on your traumatic experience, your negative experience, and what did you gain out of it, then it suddenly shifts and it becomes something that happened to you rather than your story. It's just something that happened to you on the way to your story.
Yeah, and I think also, you know, you have to look at every situation that you come through as a lesson. And I always ask myself, okay, what am I supposed to be getting here? What am I learning in this event or this situation that I'm in? And that really takes it out of your emotional, you know, heart-centered sense of what's really happening, not what you're emotionally reacting to. So I think that's a really positive approach.
It's a fast way to shift out of feeling like a victim.
Yeah, you gotta get into the objectivity of these circumstances, but it takes a while.
Sometimes years.
A lot of work.
Sometimes it takes a long time to heal enough to be able to look at what happened dispassionately as an observer and see, okay, what happened after that that might not have happened if I hadn't gone through that. And honestly, like for me, I've said this before, I'm gonna say it again. My last relationship, which was very traumatic, I would not be here doing this work I'm doing now. I don't believe I ever would have stepped into my spiritual leader role my angels have been pushing me toward for decades had that not happened. I feel like it was their last resort, like, okay, girl, here it comes, like it or not, you're going to Sedona. You are going to open this business. You are going to start doing this work full time. And the time is now. I don't think it would have happened. So that helped me let go of the pain of that and just be grateful that I got here.
It's when you reach that point where you're actually having gratitude and thankful for the lesson, whatever that was for you. That's, to me, that's like the pinnacle. That's what we strive for, is to be able to really look at the circumstances and see them for what they are and realize that you've come through this and you've gleaned a huge amount of knowledge about yourself and circumstances like that. So, but I mean, it's easy to say those words, but the reality is it takes a lot of inner work to achieve that.
It sure does. It sure does. There's times people will tell me they were just going about their day, usually driving somewhere, and they had an epiphany moment of why they went through something. And so sometimes it will come upon you, but you have to be healed enough within, and you have to be open-minded enough to receive that and embrace it as a truth, even if you don't like it.
Everything in its own time.
Yes.
You know, that's, I've spent my lifetime telling myself that mantra and trying to have it work effectively for me, because I always was just, a fireball. And sometimes you don't, that's a self-indulgence to be a fireball.
Fireballs don't have patience.
No. And I don't think I'll ever be known for mine. But
oh, you have some. I
still feel like, I have made every effort to get the lessons that were sent to me and to realize, okay, I'm right where I'm supposed to be. And I think that's another realization that we resist, but it's true. I mean, I can certainly look at relationships and situations, not romantic necessarily, but just friendship relationships, where, you reach the point where you have the reality of what is going on in that relationship and whether or not you're comfortable with that, or if the situation in the relationship has just come to an end. And I think, like you're mentioning your last romantic relationship, we reached that point where we hit the wall, literally, where we see it. The picture becomes so clear of what we're supposed to be doing and where our spiritual guideline brings us with that. So it's heavy.
It can be. I don't want to run out of time before we talk about, like, what are some symptoms of spiritual distress? Again, the flip side of spiritual wellness. I don't think it'll be a shock to you, feeling anger or hopelessness, and not just briefly, but for extended periods of time. Feelings of depression and anxiety, difficulty sleeping, feeling abandoned by God. We talked about that. Questioning the meaning of life or suffering, questioning beliefs or sudden doubt in spiritual or religious beliefs, asking why this situation occurred and seeking spiritual help or guidance. none of this is necessarily a bad or negative thing. It's a symptom. It doesn't mean you should avoid it or you don't want to have this happen. But how do you heal yourself spiritually? That can be a tricky thing. There's kind of 5 steps to spiritual healing. You have to be awareness of your situation. If you're not willing to admit you're in distress and things are not as you'd like them to be spiritually, you're not going to be ready for this. But you have to recognize your pain and be ready to overcome your fears. You have to honor your feelings. I think it's important to name your feelings. It's a therapy thing, but I feel hopeless. I feel angry. I feel paranoid, whatever it may be. After you face the source of what your anxiety is, you need to acknowledge your pain. I'm hurting. I'm hurting, and I'm hurting because of this. And then compassion for yourself. It's okay that you're hurting. It's okay that things aren't perfect in your life. I honestly have never expressed that experienced that perfect moment. I'm hoping to have that. But no perfection here yet. Surrendering your pain, just give into it and admit it. And there's been plenty of times when I was hurting really bad, physically, emotionally, spiritually. And I asked the angels, please just literally take this away from me. And they wanted me to wrap it up in a pretty package and hand the package to them. And I'm like, okay. And I did it, and I felt so much lighter. It's something I've used since then. The last is feel a lighter heart. So, there's things you can do to feel a lighter heart. And some of those things can be dancing, laughing, singing, playing musical instruments, going to a concert, places where people are joyful and things that bring joy to you, doing art, whatever it is that brings you great joy, being with friends or family who really lift you up. Those are all ways to step into that healing. So how do you help somebody else who's in spiritual distress? Because I know a lot of you out there, you probably may not be ready to see your own distress, but I bet you see it in 5, 6 other people, because it's easier to see it in other people than in ourselves. The best way to assist them is to be an active listener and provide support. Just be calm and peaceful, non-judgmental. Let them talk about their life. Talk through good times as well as bad to help them gain perspective. And if requested, reach out to a spiritual leader or a spiritual counselor who can help that person and answer their questions. I find that a journal or a diary is very helpful because it allows you to express your thoughts, your feelings, and you can record stories, write down questions, and then they can discuss that later with who they want. But basically, they really need somebody to talk to about how they're feeling. That's really the core. That kind of situation is really the core of why spiritual counseling exists. A lot of times I think people are like, what is spiritual counseling? When you're in spiritual distress, you're confused, you don't know what to do. That's what it's for. Any last words you want to say on this topic, Roz?
No, I think we covered it well.
I think we did too. So hopefully you gained some ideas about where you are with your own spiritual well-being and kind of can get some idea of when you might be going into the distress zone, as well as how to get yourself out and how to help somebody else get out of that. We're here to help each other too. Tune in next Friday. The topic is the steps to ascension. So what happens on each step, how to recognize where you are on that path to ascension, kind of the ultimate of the spiritual journey process. And in the meantime, we hope you have an enlightening week.